He is one of the most intense actors in Korea, but also one of the most controversial in recent years. In 2026, Kim Seon-ho still divides opinions. In this video, you will discover what the actresses who worked with him really think, what was said behind the scenes, and why some opinions say much more through silence than through words. When discussing the relationship between Susie and Kim Seon-ho, it is impossible not to automatically return to Startup, one of the most debated dramas of the decade. The series not only divided opinions due to its script, but also created an unexpected phenomenon: Kim Seon-ho's explosion in popularity, largely driven by the intense chemistry he built with Susie on screen. From the start of filming, Susie made it clear in interviews that Kim Seon-ho was not an ordinary actor. According to her, he had a very different approach on set. While many actors focus only on their own lines, Seon-ho did the opposite. He observed, listened, and adjusted his performance according to the energy of the scene and his partner. Susie commented that he always asked if a certain emotion felt comfortable, if the scene felt true to her, and this created a very rare sense of trust. She also highlighted something that caught the fans' attention quite a bit: his silence off camera. Susie described Kim Seon-ho as someone reserved, almost shy, but who completely transformed when filming began. For her, this change showed how seriously he took acting. It wasn't vanity, it wasn't a desire to show off, it was dedication. In later interviews, Susie went as far as to say that many of the most emotional scenes between Dalmi and Ji-pyong worked precisely because Seon-ho knew how to hold the emotion without exaggerating, leaving space for the audience to feel the character's pain and frustration. According to her, acting opposite him made it easier to access real feelings because everything seemed very honest. After the success of Startup, when fans began pressing for a possible sequel, or even an off-screen couple, Susie always maintained a careful stance. She never fueled rumors, but she also never diminished his importance in her career. On the contrary, at events and in interviews, Susie made it clear that Kim Seon-ho was one of the most memorable castmates of her career, precisely because of his emotional sensitivity and professional respect. For many fans, the fact that Susie never made criticisms, not even indirectly, even after all the controversy involving Seon-ho's name years later, says a lot. She simply remained silent, which, for the Korean public, is often the clearest form of respect. In the end, the impression remains that Susie didn't just see a talented actor, but a scene partner deeply committed to emotional truth, something she clearly values. If with Susie the public met the sensitive and quiet Kim Seon-ho, it was alongside Shin Min-ah in Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha that many came to see who he really is as a professional. Working with a veteran actress, respected and extremely discerning like Min-ah is not simple, and the fact that Kim Seon-ho earned her admiration speaks volumes. From the first interviews about the drama, Shin Min-ah made it clear that Seon-ho was a scene partner she trusted completely. According to the actress, he had an almost obsessive attention to emotional details. He didn't just memorize lines, but questioned the reason for every reaction, every pause, and every look. For her, this elevated the level of the scenes and made everything more organic. Min-ah commented that in romantic or emotionally delicate scenes, Kim Seon-ho always prioritized his partner's comfort. He would ask if a certain touch made sense, if the proximity was appropriate, and if the transmitted emotion felt true. This care, according to her, is rare in the industry and creates a safe and respectful work environment, especially for actresses. Another point Shin Min-ah highlighted was his demeanor off camera. She described Seon-ho as someone polite, discreet, and extremely consistent. There was no difference between the famous actor in front of the cameras and the man behind the scenes. For Min-ah, this consistency of behavior is one of the clearest signs of character within the entertainment industry. During the drama's broadcast, many fans began to speculate about the intense chemistry between the two. The scenes seemed too natural, too intimate. Min-ah responded to this with maturity, saying that the chemistry existed because there was absolute trust between the actors. According to her, when there is no fear or insecurity in a scene, emotion flows effortlessly. Even after the controversies that arose years later involving Kim Seon-ho, Shin Min-ah never deleted photos, never removed comments, and never tried to distance herself publicly. For many Korean fans, this detail was extremely significant. In an industry where strategic silence usually indicates distancing, Min-ah's neutral and respectful stance was interpreted as silent support. In the end, Shin Min-ah's opinion on Kim Seon-ho is clear, even when not spoken in direct words. She sees in him a mature, reliable, and emotionally intelligent actor. Someone who understands that acting isn't about individual shine, but about connection. And perhaps that is exactly why Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha left such a mark on the audience, because the emotional truth between them didn't feel like acting, felt like lived experience. Among all the actresses who spent time with Kim Seon-ho, Kang Han-na is perhaps one of those who best reveals the actor's less visible side. Unlike the protagonists who share big romantic moments on screen, Han-na had daily daily contact with Seon behind the scenes of startup, interacting with him away from the most intense spotlights, and that was exactly where she began to see him differently. In interviews after the drama ended, Kang Han-na commented that Kim Seon was someone who carried a very large emotional responsibility on set. According to her, he worried not only about his own performance, but about the general atmosphere of the filming. When he noticed someone insecure, tired, or emotionally overwhelmed, he would approach quietly, talk, listen, and offer support without ever drawing attention to himself. Han-na described Seon as someone extremely empathetic. She said he had a rare ability to perceive the emotional state of the people around him, something that, according to her, came largely from his background in theater. For Kang Han-na, this sensitivity explained why the emotions he conveyed on screen seemed so real and so human. Another point that stood out in her account was how Seon dealt with the pressure of growing popularity during startup. While the public began to idolize him and the industry started watching him more closely, he continued behaving the same way behind the scenes. According to Han-na, there was no change in attitude, ego, or posture. He kept arriving early, studying scenes, and treating everyone with the same respect. She also commented that Kim Seon used to be too hard on himself. Often, even after a take praised by the crew, he would mentally review the scene and comment that he could have done better. For Han-na, this showed not insecurity, but an almost obsessive commitment to the character's emotional truth. When asked about his reputation after the controversies that arose years later, Kang Han-na was careful but firm. She stated that her personal experience with Kim Seon was always positive, respectful, and honest. She said she never witnessed inappropriate behavior and that, as a colleague, he was always someone one could rely on. For many fans, Han-na's testimony is one of the most important precisely because it isn't loaded with romance or marketing. It is the view of someone who observed Kim Seon in ordinary moments, away from the main cameras. And the portrait she paints is clear: an introspective, sensitive man deeply committed to what he does. In the end, Kang Han-na describes not just a talented actor, but an emotionally responsible person. And perhaps it is exactly this quiet side of Kim Seon that explains why so many actresses, even without grand public declarations, continue to speak of him with respect to this day. Unlike the other actresses mentioned so far, the relationship between Yoona and Kim Seon was not built from a drama shown to the public, but from a professional project that was underway before the major controversy involving his name exploded in the media. And it is precisely this detail that makes Yoona's position even more interesting. Before Kim Seon-ho's cancellation, he and Yoona were linked to a project that would place both in the same work environment, generating anticipation from both the public and the industry. At that moment, Seon-ho was experiencing the peak of his post-hometown cha-cha-cha popularity, while Yoona remained established as one of the most respected figures in Korean entertainment. The association between the two was seen as natural and promising. According to reports from the time, Yoona had an extremely positive view of Kim Seon-ho as an actor. In general interviews about colleagues of a similar generation, she even mentioned admiration for actors who work well with silence, gaze, and contained emotion, characteristics constantly attributed to Seon-ho. For many fans, it was no coincidence that his name came up in this context just when the two were about to share a project. When the controversy involving Kim Seon-ho came to light and the cancellation was immediate, the project ended up being affected. The industry's reaction was swift and harsh, as usually happens in these cases. What drew attention, however, was Yoona's stance in the face of it all. She made no public statements, showed no discomfort, nor did she try to explicitly distance herself from the situation. Within Korean culture, this silence is not empty, it communicates. Yoona is known for being extremely strategic and careful with her image. If there had been any direct negative experience or breach of professional trust, the distancing would have been clear. But that didn't happen. She simply moved on with respect, without erasing the past or rewriting the narrative. In later interviews, when speaking about criteria for choosing scene partners, Yoona returned to highlighting the importance of emotionally mature actors and consistent professionals. Once again, without citing names directly but reinforcing values that have always been associated with Kim Seon-ho by those who worked closely with him. For many fans and industry observers, the fact that Yoona accepted to work on a project with Kim Seon-ho before the scandal, added to her neutral stance after the cancellation, says more than any public praise. It shows that, at least from a professional standpoint, he was seen as someone reliable, talented, and worthy of standing alongside an actress of her caliber. In the end, Yoona's opinion on Kim Seon-ho is built on a timeline: admiration before, respectful silence during the crisis, and no attempt at erasure afterward. And in 2026, this carries much more weight than pretty words said in interviews.